Dorje chanche tola no radang ma pa mila je jagam popa dusum je jang kungen ka ma pa je jin chongi gyo pa zonam dang Drita sa zum pa dendro pa shu zablam che ge ji la nyane pe nyame drogon da po kaiju la so wa dev so kaiju la manam Yupe zeno nam tra zinge lo Jin lo gongi kampa zompa jin Jino kong la cha jin me pa da Zede do ta cho pe gom chen la Ne ko jin pe me pa jin ji lo mu gu gong gi go wo zum pa jin men yan ta jo pa pe la ma la on do zong wei da pe gong chen la zhou min go gu ge wa jin ji lo yan me gong gi no jin zong pa jin Gan zhou dong bei no wa so ma de mei zhou de ka gong bei gong chen la gong jia la dan zhou wa jin ji lo nam to nu wo zhou ku san pa jin qi yang mei yin qi yang zhou wa la mei gang ru pa zhou wa gong chen la Ode yo me to pa jinji lo e ma wa kun to yon da la ma da ro me jong ke pa la ron cho chen ta da la ki yon te ra don de do je chang e go pa yon ta shu Sanjay Shondan Zoki Chotnan La Janchu Padu Naki Kapsuchi Dagi Soki Peso Sipnam Ki Dola Pinja Sanjay Dropasho Sanjay Chondan Soki Chotnan La Janchu Padu Naki Kapsuchi Dagi Janso Gipe Sunam Ki Drola Pinja Sanje Dropasho. And then the third time in English or your native language. Until I reach enlightenment, I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Noble Sangha. Through the merit of accomplishing the six perfections, may I achieve awakening for the benefit of all sentient beings. Okay. Let me get situated here. Okay. Well, thanks everyone for coming. Getting towards the end, I think, of the class, one more class after me. The particular topic is this mantra, which is essentially an introductory course to deity yoga. The topic, although this is a beginner's course, the topic itself is fairly advanced. So I will do my best to cover it, but it is kind of a dense topic. So at first, we'll start with the discursive thinking or dualistic thinking. The sentient beings have a constant stream of thoughts in their minds, which are called discursive thoughts, that are tied to past, present, and future events. Normally, people are unaware of thoughts, what's going on in their minds, and they fixate on these particular thoughts. So, to kind of give a simple example, if I use a sentence like, I have a cup, we can say that the I is the subject and that the cup is the object. So, in doing that, we have our duality. We have two entities. We have the I, and then we have the cup. I, the subject, cup, the object. So, to go a little bit deeper into this, um, we have in Buddhism, there's the eight consciousness, and the first one through five are sense-based, and then there's the mental consciousness, which is number six, and then self is number seven, and then the eighth is the basis of everything, or the Alaya. So if we we'll focus on just one of the sense consciousness, let's say the I conscious, for example. The traditional way of breaking this down is the I consciousness is deals with has the ability to see, and then the cup, which would be the object, and then the resulting sort of sense consciousness would arise from that. So you got the subject, the object, the sense power, and then the resulting consciousness. So when we look at like a cup, for example, there's an appearance in our mind, and we have this duality, this subject and object, and we cling to this duality, this appearance in our consciousness. And so when we cling to what appears in the mind, we start to have problems. And we can fixate on these thoughts, and they can become kleshas, or impure mental states that cloud the mind and lead one to take unwholesome actions. So examples for kleshas can be ignorance, attachment, aversion, pride, and envy. Those would be the five poisons. So the point of starting the topic, or the first topic, the first point, is that this is essentially our sort of fundamental problem. It's our start point. And so the next topic will be Buddha nature. Now, there's already a talk done on that, so I'm just going to hit like the highlights that are important for this part of for this particular discussion. So Buddha nature, at its core, all beings at their core, their essence is Buddha. Buddha nature is our ground, and it's incorruptible, unshakable, without stain or imperfection. It can't be destroyed by corruptions, defilements, delusions, or ignorance. So Buddha nature itself can manifest in different ways. First, the Dharmachakra. The Dharmachakra is the formless aspect, and it corresponds to the awakened mind's emptiness. And because it's empty, it's without form, shape, or color. It does have qualities. Just because it's formless doesn't mean that it still has qualities. The Sambhogakaya is the second form, and this is the body of perfect enjoyment, which is only visible to individuals with a high level of realization, and emphasizes the qualities of awakening. It's able to transmit the Dharma without a need for speech or listening. And the last way is the Nirmanakaya body. The Nirmanakaya is an emanation body or actual manifestation of the Buddha to normal perceptions, those with karmic obscurations, like ourselves. When we talk about the historical Buddha Shakyamuni, he is a Nirmanakaya manifestation. So when we move from the Dharmakaya, so the Dharmakaya through compassion arises as two kayas, the Sambhogakaya and the Nirmanakaya. So there's an analogy that's given with this. It's like the sun being the Dharmakaya. It beams sun rays similar to that of the Sambhogakaya and reflects on the water's surface like the Nirmanakaya. So we started with that's Buddha nature, or at least the part that will be relevant for the talk. We started with our problem, which was essentially discursive thinking, dualistic thinking, clinging to what appears in the mind. And we then talked about Buddha nature, which is our ultimate potential, our sort of goal. So we started with our problem and our goal, essentially. Now, when we move into placing deity meditation sort of in the context of the different vehicles, so looking at it from Hinayana, Mahayana, Vajrayana perspective. So dealing with the flicked emotions are done differently. If I go back to my example of the cup, so I could say, I'm angry that I lost my cup. So in that sort of situation, how does a Hinayana practitioner deal with these sort of things? So a Hinayana practitioner or approach deals with renunciation. They renounce the thing that they're attached to. And since I would be a renunciate, I wouldn't have any attachment to the cup, and therefore I wouldn't become angry. Hinayana emphasizes the moral discipline. Mahayana deals with the situation a little bit differently. It deals with it from the point of view of transformation. So the situation arises, lose the cup, but then I use that negative experience as inspiration. I may generate compassion for other people that may have lost material possessions and developed a negative state of mind. So in this case, I still feel the emotion. I just relate to it differently. I use it for inspiration. Now, when we get to the Vajrayana, it's different. It's transmutation. If you can really do this, you're able to reside in the nature of mind and it doesn't generate anger. Instead, you would experience a quality of the nature of your mind. And in the case of anger, it would be discriminating wisdom. You don't actually experience the klesha the same way as ordinary beings do. The emphasis in the Vajrayana is using Buddha nature, our inherent potential for enlightenment, as the key development method along the path. So one way to distinguish these two is we have the causal and the resultant vehicles. So in the Hinayana, the Mahayana, we call those the causal vehicles because they take the approach that we can realize our Buddha nature by increasing our positive qualities in a sequence of cause and effect. Basically, we do through accumulation and purification is the emphasis in the causal approach. In the Vajrayana approach, we call it the resultant vehicle because it takes the goal or the fruition itself as the path to uncover qualities considered inherently present. And as a result, it's considered the faster path, that it can be done in one lifetime in one body. That would be, of course, that does take a lot of diligence on one's part to do that. Between the two, the sutric teachings are considered to be more accessible and easier to understand, but are considered more difficult to practice. And in contrast, the tantric teachings are harder to understand, but easier to practice. So I'm going to shift into a little bit about the history of deity meditation. It was originally introduced by Buddha Shakyamuni in several scriptures, and it was made more available through the writings of other teachers such as Guru Rinpoche or Padmasambhava, who brought Buddhism from India to Tibet in the 9th century. In terms of the historical origins, the rituals and practices are almost identical to that of the Hindu tradition. So it's a little difficult to say who influenced who, so to speak, as it sort of developed in India. Deity meditation is based on the concept that Buddha Shakyamuni taught. We are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. And with our thoughts, we make the world. So I'll get a little into the description of the primary techniques. The word yidam is said to be a contraction of yidamsik, which essentially means bind, dam, one's mind, yid, by oath to a deity who embodies enlightened mind. In other words, yidam is the very manifestation of enlightenment. So the actual yidam visualization, and this, I have to make this very generic because there's so many different methods that the details will vary. So deity meditation starts with visualizing emptiness, void, and this is to represent the Dharmachakra. So that aspect of the Dharmachakra that we talked about as far as one's Buddha nature. And then the visualization of the deity essentially is the Sambhogakaya aspect. And it can be the deity plus the associated mandala, or his sort of realm, the being's realm, his world. The Vajrayana techniques cultivate pure vision or sacred outlook, emphasizes the unconventional to sort of break the barriers of into non-conceptual understanding of one's true nature. We visualize these enlightened forms, and we work with energy to help cultivate this pure vision. Now, the term mandala, you'll see the deity at the center, and then the mandala. The term essentially means simply center and surroundings, and it's nothing more fancy than that. It's a lot of times it's the being and essentially the palace around him or her. What you're doing is essentially creating this visualization world to represent the Sambhogakaya aspect of this being, and to break away from our habitual way of seeing our mundane world. So in the Hinayana and the Mahayana, those particular vehicles, with the Vajrayana, we still build upon what they've created. And so the moral discipline, for example, of the Hinayana is still part of Vajrayana practice. If not, then we'd have difficulties with or some of the unconventional behaviors may become problematic. So you still need the discipline of the Hinayana. And the Mahayana, which emphasize emptiness and compassion, is also part of the overall visualization and practice. And it's also in other aspects of the practice as far as refuge and making offerings and reciting mantras. So in this way, Vajrayana, the deity practice, is building on top of other techniques and ideas of the other vehicles. So it's not that everything is abandoned and we're going down a different road. We're essentially taking it and using different methodologies to be more effective, quick. So the different stages of deity practice. So this essentially is all of our practices, and we started this way. We started this way with all the different teachings. We start with there's what they call the three excellences: excellent in the beginning, excellent in the middle, and excellent in the end. So excellent in the beginning means we generate the motivation of bodhicitta, which is the goal of the chanting that we did at the start. So even if one doesn't have a formal practice or formal liturgy to chant, that attitude can still be generated. That whatever I encounter, I work with it in a way that with the motivation of bodhicitta. In the middle, whatever practice that we're working on, we should stay single focused on that practice. In this particular situation, because it's deity yoga, there's an A and a B. There's two parts. So we have the generation stage, which is essentially the world building aspect of the deity itself, and then the mandala to create its sort of world. And then the completion stage, which would be the second part. And that is once we've completed the sadhana and dissolved everything. And then excellent in the end is simply dedicating the merit to the benefit of all sentient beings. And the reason that we dedicate merit in any practice is that once one has generated an activity that's virtuous, that virtuous activity will in turn eventually result in a positive, will ripen in a positive way. But once it's ripened, it's exhausted, it's gone. So we dedicate the merit, and this way we tie the virtuous activity to all sentient beings. And as a result, it becomes inexhaustible. So the generation stage, so going to go back into the middle part of practice. The generation stage, or the creation, the world building, so to speak, it has aspects of body, speech, and mind. So in the body, you have different mudras or hand gestures. Some are simpler, some are more complex. In some cases, although you'll probably won't be doing it, but there'll be Lama dancing is also a way of working with the body. Speech, the sadhana has different chanting, different mantras, and of course you'd pay attention to the voice and the sound when you're working with the sadhana. And then mind. Mind is essentially, in this case, transforming your discursive thoughts through visualization, generating appropriate feelings and emotions and thoughts to help create that inner experience of the deity. The completion stage is when the visualization is collapsed. And so you've done the world building, so to speak. And towards the end, you'll collapse everything down and then rest in that single point of mind. And at this point, this is when one is practicing essentially Mahamudra, or what there's different names for this: Mahamudra, non-egotistic view, non-duality, absolute bodhicitta. They're all essentially the same point that you're cultivating. So you're essentially practicing Mahamudra for that short moment, until the first thought arises, and then you regenerate the deity and the mandala. So there's a gap between dissolving everything and then the first thought that arises. That gap is when you would be resting in the nature of your mind in Mahamudra. So with the generation stage, there are certain sort of characteristics that one wants to cultivate when doing the practice. The first is clarity of appearance. So when you're doing the generation, you want it to be clear but insubstantial. So like a rainbow. Not is a rainbow, but like a rainbow. In modern terms, we may think of it like a hologram. I've seen people refer to it as that. But it's the point of it being there, but not being permanent. Or, sorry, being insubstantial. There are some funny stories. I remember Mingyur Rinpoche talked about how he mentioned a meditator who had kind of a pointed head. And so the meditator was visualizing his guru on top of his head, but his guru kept sliding off because his head was pointed. So this would be an example of taking things too substantial. And I also remember Kimbo Kartar giving an example of a meditator who was in a cave. And so he also created a very large visualization on top of his head with his guru and the guru above him, and on and on. And the problem that he had was he couldn't get out of the cave because it was on his head and he couldn't get through the cave door. So it should be insubstantial. And then that problem won't occur. So for the clarity of appearance, it's the karmic conditions that
Okay, what's going on is Lama Mark's internet just went down. So we're going to wait just a couple of minutes to see if it gets restored, and if not, then we'll have to reschedule this at another time.